Manchester is a must-visit city for everyone, and we already covered an important spy spot in our very first episode of this series. Nonetheless, we are back now to talk about a spying device that is displayed in a museum in Manchester. This is Anastasios from the UK, and that's our 17th episode of this series. Welcome to Spy Spots. There are countless things to do and see in Manchester, and PHM, or People's History Museum, is definitely one of them. As we read in its official website, this is the National Museum of Democracy, telling the story of its development in Britain, past, present and future. Explore the radical stories of people coming together to champion ideas worth fighting for, and be empowered by the past to make a change for the future. We are all together in the fight for a fairer world. Although we barely marched together before closing time, the staff was exceptionally helpful, so big thanks to PHM staff in advance. Now overall, PHM will give you a very rich and unique understanding of Britain's development, and especially around its highly complex political system and its history. Even just for this reason, it's worth visiting. But back to our area of expertise. Among the many artifacts and exhibitions, there is an entire section about the Communist Party of Great Britain, or CPGP. As we read, the Communist Party of Great Britain was formed in 1920. The party had several MPs elected and was the fourth largest political party. It promoted some successful campaigns, and members were among those who died fighting in the Spanish Civil War. However, ultimately, it did not have much public appeal and was dissolved in 1991. And we'll add to that, along with the fall of the Soviet Union, that also happened in 1991. Because of that connection, CPGP was a primary target of espionage during the Cold War, primarily due to the UK's fear that the Soviet Union would use this as their medium to infiltrate Britain and take it under its influence. Also note that in the UK, counterintelligence is a responsibility of the MI5, officially known as the Security Service, so it was their job to look for potential Soviet spies inside CPGP. And that leads us to this artifact, as per its label. The surveillance bag, discovered by builders in February of 1975, was probably used by MI5 to spy on communist activity. Former MI5 officer Peter Wright may have planted it, as in his book Spy Catcher, he describes concealing a bag at Communist Party headquarters. The government did not admit responsibility for the device. The larger quote under this label is from the book Spy Catcher, written by former MI5 officer Peter Wright in 1987, a must-read book for anyone interested in intelligence. Here is the full quote from this book that, according to PHM, refers to this bag that is on display. I first operated against the CPGP in the late 1950s, when Hugh Winterborn and I installed yet another microphone into its King Street headquarters. The CPGP knew that this building was under constant technical surveillance and regularly switched the location of important meetings. An agent inside King Street told his F4 controller that executive committee discussions had been moved to a small conference room at the far end of the building. There were no windows in the room, and we knew from the agent that there was no telephone either, so SF could not solve the problem of providing coverage. Later in the 1960s, the reason for the lack of a telephone became clear. One of the first things Anthony Blunt had betrayed to the Russians was the existence of SF, immediately after it was first installed in King Street, and they had alerted the party and instructed them to remove all telephones from sensitive areas. But the party did not really believe it. They took precautions only for very sensitive matters. Winterborn and I drove down to King Street in my car and sat outside studying the external walls, trying to decide the best way to attack the target room. Low down, on the left-hand side of the street-facing wall, was an old coal chute which had been out of use for many years. It seemed to present the best possibility. We checked with the agent where this chute went and were told that it led straight into the conference room. I suggested to Winterbourne that we make a false door identical to the one already in the chute, clipping it over the top of the old door with a radio microphone between the two, feeding it to the keyhole. Hugh immediately began to make the arrangements. First, he designed a new door which could lock against the chute with spring catches. The door obviously had to be painted the same color as the existing one, which was a heavily weather-beaten brown. We contacted the building research station in Garston and sent them sample flakes of the paint, which Hugh removed with a screwdriver one night while casually walking past. They identified the paint for us and acquired some of a similar vintage. Using a blowtorch and a sink of water, we were able to simulate a weathering process. I handled the installation of the radio microphone on our door. I used a small plastic audio tube to run from the keyhole in the chute to the microphone, filling the rest of the space with batteries, so that the microphone could run without being serviced for up to 6 months. The receiver was hidden in the telephone footway box at the end of King Street, which luckily was just within range of the microphone, and telephone lines relayed the signal back to the 7th floor of Leconfield House. The most risky part of the operation was fitting the false door on the pavement of King Street. It had to be done in full view of the CPGP building, and they were constantly alert to anything suspicious. Hugh Winterbourne devised a typically complex plan. He decided to make the installation late on a Saturday night, as theatre revelers thronged the streets in Covent Garden. He arranged for all available A2 and F4 officers and their wives to converge on King Street from different directions at a set time. We were all choreographed carefully by Winterbourne to arrive in 2 groups, pretending to be much the worse for drink. We met on the pavement and exchanged greetings. Behind the huddle, Winterbourne dropped down to his knees and began to hand drill 4 small holes in the wall of the chute, ready to receive the spring catches of our door, using his pocket handkerchief to catch the telltale brick dust. Within a minute, our noisy socializing began to wear a little thin, but Winterbourne had nerves of steel. He patiently finished the drilling, slipped the false door out from under his coat, and clipped it into place. The operation, known as typing, worked perfectly as planned, and for some months, MI5 had full coverage of every important CPGP meeting. But in the end, a microphone was detected. A CPGP official happened to settle on our frequency when tuning his radio, and a whole round alerted him to the presence of a device. The entire building was turned upside down in search of the bug. Fortunately, Hugh Winterbourne was living in the flat on the top floor of Leconfield House at the time, while his wife was away visiting relatives in Norway. He was alerted as soon as the microphone was detected and went around straight away, undipped the false door, and brought it back to the office like a trophy of war. And also found another photo of this bug from the social history portal here, indicating that this was added to the museum's inventory in 1997. The newspaper in the background also shows us how the bug looked like with its concealment device. Once again, if you haven't visited PHM yet, please pay them a visit and you won't be disappointed. You might have not guessed that you'd find such a spy artifact in a place called People's History Museum, but truth is that espionage is referred to as the second oldest profession, so whether we like it or not, it's part of people's history, and it's why we should all remember that nothing is as it seems.